Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Adult Child of Dysfunction. Today, our special guest is Elicia Ybarra. She is a women's self defense instructor, lifelong martial artist, master in Taekwondo, and an advocate for survivors of abuse. She is drawing from her own experiences overcoming a dysfunctional upbringing and exploitation within the martial arts industry. She founded Empower and Defend Women's Self Defense. Her mission is to teach women practical self defense skills by fostering confidence, setting boundaries, and standing against abuse in all of its forms. Passionate about empowerment and resilience, Elicia uses her platform to inspire others to reclaim their power and learn to thrive. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I know we've been trying to get together for a while now.
Yeah, life just happened, right? As it
Oh
always
yeah.
does. So, tell us first of all, you started a martial arts studio. Nobody does that and becomes a master of taekwondo and gets really into the martial arts without really having a reason. Or maybe it started as a child, but tell us a little bit about your story and then we're going to go in and talk about what you do because I love what you do.
Thank you. Yes, I am actually a lifelong martial artist. I began training at 6 years old. I really wanted to go to Japan and be a ninja because I loved the Ninja Turtles. Donatello is my favorite, and I was very much a tomboy growing up. And I got into the industry. I felt like it was my escape as a child, from a chaotic childhood and a dysfunctional family. Um, and then as I hit puberty, I ended up facing a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional, mental, pretty much all of the abuses I ended up facing. And the one thing that I found was that even though I was physically able to defend myself, I didn't have the capacity or the understanding about things like boundaries to protect my mental and emotional space.
Mm.
So as I went through my early adolescence and into adulthood and I faced this abuse, I had no understanding of what trauma or triggers or anything like that was. So once I had my son at the end of my 20s and I was in a healthy environment, I was in a healthy relationship. I met a man and married him who taught me what real love was and not control and manipulation. I began to heal from those traumas. And as I healed, I recognized that so many women lack the ability to set boundaries because we're simply not taught how to. And I realized that through my business, Pretty Hands, Hard Punches, instead of only focusing on the physical aspects of what to do when you're attacked, I needed to focus on the overall concept of personal safety, which was situational awareness, recognizing red flags, setting boundaries, and teach women how to approach their personal safety because they are valuable enough to protect themselves. And that is kind of where my idea came into for my business, Pretty Hands, Hard Punches, from all of that to teach women how to empower and defend themselves because most women don't. We were taught to nurture. We were taught to push our feelings aside in the favor of making everyone else comfortable. And unfortunately, especially in the society we live in, when women do that, they become more vulnerable to abuse.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that name, Pretty Hands, Hard Punches.
Thank
Like,
you. It's one of my favorites.
yeah, no, it makes so much sense. And it does make sense because yes, you grew up and you did the martial arts and you did taekwondo and you could physically defend yourself, but you're right, that doesn't save you from the manipulation and the boundaries and the being violated in every other way other than physically. It just doesn't. And that is something I love that you incorporate that into self-defense because ultimately we are defending ourselves, but we want to do it in an empowered power, a good way, not just rolling over and dying, you know.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, young women and women in general are taught that in order to physically defend yourself, you have to have all of this training. You have to be a black belt or a master. But the reality is there are very few techniques that women can use and can utilize in protecting themselves that I was even not aware of until I had to use them to save my own life against my abuser. So it comes from my business and the way I teach comes from the the knowledge that I knew how to physically defend myself. And I always thought if somebody ever attacked me, I was going to do some super cool ninja shit. Like I was like, I'm going to do some spinning back kick. I'm going to knock him out. The reality is when I had to save my own life against my abuser, I did the very basic technique of what is called a palm strike. And I used my palm to break his nose. And that was how I saved my own life. It wasn't the super cool ninja flip trick you see Black Widow do in the Marvel movies, right? It was a very simple technique that I learned at 6 years old, and I honed that skill for several years.
Wow. And it's funny. It brings me back to college because I lived in North Carolina and there was a series of rapes going on in the neighborhood I lived in. And I was like, well, let me take a self-defense course. I mean, everybody could use one of those. And I remember our final exam, the instructor kind of put you in, you were just in a normal situation, like you'd be sitting there at school doing whatever. And he came up and you had to, he was trying to teach instincts and just what can you do right now because you're not always braced in a stance ready to, like you said, do the superfly ninja kick. And it was so funny. And he walked up behind me and I grabbed out of my purse my brush. And I didn't actually mean to hit him. I was just going to show what I could do. And I raked him basically across the face with the bristles of my brush. And he's like, oh
That's
my
smart.
God, Tammy. And I was like, you said whatever happens instinctually. Like that's what I grabbed. I knew that would hurt you. And at the end of the day, it's like nobody, like you said, nobody can tolerate having their nose broken. Nobody can tolerate when you kick them sideways on their kneecap. Like they go down and you
Nobody
don't
can
have to be,
tolerate having their eyes gouged.
or having their eyes gouged. I mean, if a shark attacks you, what do they say to do? Poke them in the eye. I
Yeah,
mean, so,
I,
but
simple
yeah,
moves.
yeah, I mean, just, and it was funny. And he's like, okay, I'll give you an A, but that really hurt. And I'm like, I didn't mean to hurt you, but you said, and I obviously maybe shouldn't have actually made contact, but it's instinctual. But a lot of people don't have that. They're so, I don't want to say scared that they freeze or scared that they get themselves in situations where they don't even feel, like you said, worthy to stand up for themselves and they just succumb. Is that a lot of the mindset work that you do in your work?
Absolutely. And just for your listeners, I, even as a black belt, froze the first time my abuser ever attacked me. I was completely stunned. He backhanded me, threw me on the bed, and started to strangle me. And I did not fight back. I had no idea what to do. I was like, what is happening? This man who says he loves me is attacking me right now. And the next time when I did fight back, it wasn't for myself. It was because he kicked my dog, because
Oh,
by the time I had been in the point where I needed to fight back to save my life, I had already been with him for 18 months. He had already broken me down. And because of the other abuses I endured, I didn't feel worthy enough to fight back. Had he not kicked my dog, I don't think I would be here today. It was
wow, that
my
just
ability and my need to protect my little Chiweenie, my 6 pound Chiweenie I named Rocky Balboa, that encouraged me to fight for my life. And there is such a thing called fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that is your brain figuring out how to survive. Now, we as women in society are taught to disregard our fear in favor of being polite. We get on the elevator even when we're scared because we don't want to be considered, rude or aggressive or mean or a bitch, which I've been called multiple times, right? We, take the drink that the man at the bar offers us because we don't want to be considered rude. And the reality is that as women and as human beings, we are gifted fear as a survival instinct. When your hairs on the back of your neck stand up, when you get the feeling to just book it, turn around and run away as fast as you can, that is your survival instincts. And we have been conditioned through our society to disregard that in the favor of being feminine. And when we don't disregard it, we're too assertive, we're too aggressive, and we're too mean. And we often fear that we will be blamed for the attack that happens to us because we didn't handle it the right way. I say, and I teach all my students this, that learning how to recognize those red flags, to recognize your intuition, to trust your gut is how you stay safe. It is going to keep you more safe than anything I can ever teach you in terms of kicking and punching. When you feel the fear, walk away. When you see someone disrespecting your boundaries, walk away. When you see a man giving you red flag after red flag, don't disregard that in favor of being polite. Walk away. And that is how we stay safe. A lot of times in dangerous situations, that's where it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes total sense. And, I keep flashing back to the times that I froze, that I didn't have I want to say the confidence or even like like mental practice to know what to do in a situation. It's kind of like when you have anxiety attacks and you practice what to do during an anxiety attack when you're not when you're not having one, then it becomes muscle memory is
Yep.
is and I kind of feel like that's how it works with boundaries. Like you play out these scenarios that could possibly happen, and then it's not fight or flight or freeze or fawn. It's I'm ready because I've practiced this and I've gotten ready for this. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, I love it. So you teach all kinds of different stuff. You teach the mental, you teach the physical. Is it Taekwondo is what you mainly teach for the self-defense, or is it an overall broad?
It's overall. As a matter of fact, I tend to teach more of the Hapkido side of self-defense and less of the Taekwondo. I do consider Taekwondo more of the sport. Like if you're looking to get sweaty and do some cardio, Taekwondo is great. If you're looking to break some bones, Hapkido is the way to go. All right. If you're looking, I recommend to all women if they're gonna get into a style of martial arts and they're gonna start training to actually do jujitsu, which is something I trained in only for a very brief amount of time in my early adolescence and into early adulthood. But the reason I say that is because Jiu-jitsu teaches you what to do when you're on the ground. And if a man is going to try to assault you, you're going to end up laying down somehow.
Mm,
And jiu-jitsu teaches you what to do with that. So my program is kind of a mix of all of it. But really what I teach is the think, yell, run, fight, tell method. So the fight is only a small aspect of the entire overall protection. And I teach mine based off the empowerment self-defense model that was developed by the National Women's Martial Arts Federation over 50 years ago. And that was when a group of black belts and women got together because they realized that what traditional martial arts teaches in self-defense is not enough for women. It's enough for men who look at self-defense as a physical reaction to an attack. But for women, we are already at a disadvantage when we're physically being attacked. We have to go behind that or further back and go for the prevention before the fighting back. So how do we recognize the danger? What do we do to escape the danger? How do we use things like our language, tone, and posture to make sure that our maybe perpetrator understands that we are not going to be a compliant victim. We are not going to be an easy victim. And often perpetrators are looking for that easy victimization. They're looking for someone to be compliant. And a lot of times, if you have had no self-defense training, one of the things that we condition young women in as they grow up is don't fight back, let them have your body so they don't take your life. But the reality is, if somebody's going to take your life, they're going to take your life whether you fight back or not. You have a
right.
better chance of getting away by showing that you are going to be strong and confident and you will fight back than you're ever going to have at just letting it happen. And when I say letting it happen, I mean as a survival instincts. I don't mean that it's a choice of consent.
Right. Absolutely. It's funny. I work for a company that helps human trafficking survivors and they kind of rehabilitate them and help them integrate back into society. And they do a lot of awareness and intervention and, just awareness. And they interviewed a gentleman that was actually in prison for many, many years for child sex trafficking. And they asked him, how do you choose your victims? And it was this simple. He said they went to and they found them and they asked them one question, just, can you do this or will you do this or do you want this? And if they said no, they asked them one more time. And if they said yes, then they knew that they would be compliant to anything. If they said no the second time, they left them because it wasn't worth the fight.
Absolutely.
And how simple is that?
Absolutely.
And I'm looking at young children and I'm looking at like my 5-year-old daughter. If someone had come up to her and said, do you want a piece of candy? She would say, no, I'm not allowed to take candy from people I don't know. And if they said, well, you sure? She would be like, did you not hear me the first time?
Yeah.
But that's her. She was gifted with that, not everybody has that personality. Most people be like, okay, like you said, you don't want to get in trouble. So you conform and you just do what seems nice and pleasant because that's what you've been trained, quote unquote, trained to do.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a study that was done, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but they took 1,000 inmates that were convicted of rape and they had them watch videos of women walking. Just watch videos of women walking and asked which one of these women they would choose. And almost all of them chose the same group of women. And when they were asked why, they said very specific things. They said her shoulders were hunched, she
Mm,
was distracted, and she was alone. Those were the three things that these convicted rapists chose to look for. Because if you're alone, if you're distracted, and if you look meek in nature, which means you look like you're going to be compliant, you're going to be a much easier person to victimize than the woman who is aware of her surroundings with her shoulders up, who makes eye contact with the man, right? Those are the three things that will keep you safe. Those are the prevention aspect of being not victimized. And that's what we as women, we need to look for. And just to tell you on the end of like your daughter saying no twice, my son is the opposite. He would be like, yeah, give me candy. And I have to like constantly tell him, we do not do that. Strangers should not be talking to children. Adults do not keep secrets with children, right? Like I'm constantly on that with him. He's 6 years old. He would probably still try to take that candy. So it's definitely part of the kid. And my son's an extrovert. He talks to adults all the time. He's
mm,
very articulated in his speech. So when he speaks like he's much older most
mm.
of the time.
Yeah, right. and and also because of that, well mannered. So again,
Mhm.
he's being polite, he's doing what he thinks an adult, and I remember telling my kids, not all adults are your quote unquote bosses. You listen to your mom, you listen to your dad, you listen to the adults, as far as another adult, unless
Yeah,
you're in a
I
classroom
tell him the same
setting or
thing.
something, but an outside setting, those are not your people. The people are the people that love you, that take care, those are your people you listen to the rules to. Wow, it gave me goosebumps when you told a couple of the stories because you just like, oh. And talk, I mean, that makes so much sense. And it's funny for the people that are out there listening, and especially on my podcast, we have a lot of people that are listening that don't have that confidence. And it comes, guys, you're not going to believe this, but even if you don't feel confident and you pick up your chest and you open your chest out and you walk straight with your head held high, you will gain confidence just in doing that. It's
Yes.
literally like it's one of those things. If you open up your chest, you're like, wow. I mean, if you feel big, you are big. That's kind of, but
Take up
it's
space.
what I'm sorry.
Take up space.
Yeah, take up space. Don't ever apologize for taking up space. So I tell people because pay attention to yourself how you walk. I and it does make sense. I see people all the time and they're walking kind of like this, and the eye contact is a big one. If you look someone dead in the eye, and that's why COVID just drove me crazy because all of a sudden kids stopped looking at people in the eyes. It's like they were afraid. And I was like, no, you look someone dead in the eye. That's like respect, and it's just a mutual, it's like you're communicating. You're saying something in every situation.
Yep.
So,
I completely agree. Always look people in the eye. It's a confidence thing. And it's where you show people that you have confidence in yourself. When you are able to make eye contact with someone, it shows that you don't have fear,
right.
that you don't fear that person.
Yep.
And that is if you watch women who are abused and even men who are abused, right? If you watch abuse victims, they very seldomly will make eye contact with their abuser. Very seldomly. Most of the times their eyes will be downcast.
Or even people that they just don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, definitely they're abusive, but even sometimes they just kind of, and it's a quick, I notice it right away. You can see someone looking and then they look down and they look and and it's like this shifty kind of eyes, like they're not quite making a connection. They, you know, And that is a,
And that's
that,
a
that
top behavior. Just so your listeners know, people that make down their no eye contact and they downcast their eyes, that is because someone in their life, whether it's an abuser, a parent, someone with power and control in their life, taught them that that is a disrespectful thing to do, taught them that they are going to be in trouble for making eye contact, taught them not to do that. And that's a learned behavior most of the time because little kids will make eye contact with everybody.
yeah,
like
yeah,
like
they
they don't
stare.
care. They'll look at everybody. But as they get older, if they get in trouble for that, if they're told not to do that, or if they're punished, that's when it becomes kind of known and understood by the other people that this person doesn't have the confidence to make that eye contact.
Right. And I know like, and it's every, every situation is so different. I remember when I was a kid, I knew I was in trouble if my father was like looking me dead in the eye and go, you look at me when I'm speaking to you. And I would be looking everywhere but his eyes. Like I'd be looking at his forehead, his eyebrows, his chin, wherever. And he's like, no, look it like, and that instilled fear in me for a long time because I knew I was in trouble. I knew something
Yeah.
big was going down if I had to stare directly into his eyes, but it took a while. And then it was actually my self-defense teacher in college that was teaching me about eye contact, and he's like, no, you look down like that or shifty, you'll look scared, like you said. I mean, and it goes, I know it's kind of weird, but do you ever talk to people about like the instincts and compare them kind of to animal instincts? Because that's the thing,
Yeah.
like with animals, like look them in the eye and because if you don't, they sense fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an animalistic instinct in general to make eye contact, right? Like if a dog's staring at you in the eyes, like you know something's about to go down. Right? Like I don't know, my dog always was like that. But also the thing that I teach my students specifically is that boundaries are where you stay safe. When you know where your line is drawn, when you know and you're confident enough in yourself to know what you're uncomfortable with and what you're comfortable with, you become acutely aware when somebody starts to push that line and you can recognize it. Often, we as young women are taught to allow the adults or the men in our life to set our boundaries for us. So it's not about our comfortability. It's not about when we're uncomfortable. It's about making someone else happy. And that is what tells us our value and our worth. So in my class, I have to actually untrain that and start saying, you have the right to take up space. You are valuable in yourself as a person, and you are allowed to set your own boundaries for yourself. And that is where most of my self-defense training comes in. It's not, which I always thought it would be physical, right? Of course, self-defense, it's physical or it's a weapon. But the reality is having the confidence to recognize when somebody is pushing your boundaries or disrespecting your boundaries is going to keep you safe. That is where you're going to have the confidence to recognize a dangerous situation for what it is without talking yourself out of it with the rhetoric we've been taught. And that is where we as women will stay safe.
Nice. Very, very well said. Yes. Can you give some more examples for the people that are listening? Kind of, I know you did the eye, walk with your shoulders not slumped and carry your head high and make eye contact. Are there any other things you can think of just so that people throughout the day can even just start to be aware of what they normally do?
Absolutely. Be aware of the routes you take. Be aware of the people that are behind you. Take note of the things that are happening around you. If you're walking into a store, and I can give you a perfect example of this. When I was 9 months pregnant, I was like getting ready to pop with my baby. I stopped at a Kohl's to buy a gift for something, and I walked in, and there was a van that was parked directly behind me, a white van. And it gave me a little bit of an insecure feeling. I was like, what is going on? So I go out and I go back and I'm coming out of the store with my one bag and I'm like waddling, right? Because I'm 9 months pregnant. And now the van was right next to my car. And I was like, my first thought was, that's weird. My second thought was, I don't want to make a fuss. And my third thought was, that's not safe. So I walked back into Kohl's and I had somebody escort me to my car. There were two men sitting in the front seat of that car. That is the type of example that we need to use on a daily basis. I
Mm,
recognize the uncomfortability and I almost talked myself out of going and getting someone to walk me to my car in favor of being polite. I thought it would be rude or disrespectful in some way to the people parked in that van. And I went through a whole bunch of excuses as to why that van might be parked next to my driver door. Thankfully, right, I was able to talk myself out of that and go back in and get someone to help me. Most of the time, we as women will not talk ourselves out. We'll talk ourselves out of the safety aspect. We will talk ourselves out of getting help in favor of being polite. So being aware of your surroundings and what is happening around you, knowing what type of cars are behind you and around you, knowing when you go to a bar or you go on a date, having the inclination of how far you want to go. How many drinks do you want to have? How many, if you're going on a date, how far do you want to go with that person on that date when you go? And knowing how far you want to go, you will become acutely aware if that person is pushing you to say, have more drinks or go up to his apartment or something along those lines. A lot of times we just go out, we're ready to party, we're ready to do it. We don't think about how far we want to go. So on our daily lives, those are the types of things we need to think about. How far do we want? Where are we uncomfortable? Are we uncomfortable with the man walking behind us, super close and almost able to read our phone? Okay, think about that scenario and what you would do ahead of time. Would you go into the local coffee shop? Would you stop and let him pass you? That way, when you encounter a situation that you're uncomfortable with, you already have an action plan for most of the common uncomfortability that women face. That is the way that you stay safe. Okay, I'm going to go into the coffee shop. Knowing where you're going and what you're doing in that time, that is where, and also obviously staying alert, right? Knowing what's happening, don't be distracted. And the thing I'll add on to the distractibility is that women in our society are blamed for what happens to us. If we are assaulted, what were we wearing? If we aren't assaulted and we fight back, like, why didn't we run away? We're always going to be blamed. And we need to have that mentality of, I have to keep myself safe because nobody's going to protect me. The judicial system's not going to protect me. My husband, if he's not standing next to me, he's not going to be able to protect me, right? If nobody is going to protect me, how do I protect myself? And having that mentality makes you understand the dangers that are around you without living your life in all fear, right? We don't need to walk to our car with our keys between our fingers. We need to walk to our car understanding what's happening around us so that if we need to run, we know where to go.
Right. Right. And just that awareness of, like you said, we have that sixth sense and we have been so trained not to listen to it. I go back to your example at Kohl's, and I can so see how you would be like, oh, that's kind of weird that car is there. That's where now that that's happened, now next time, that's where we'll stop. You'll be like, not going anywhere near that car. We used to I know the white vans, I shouldn't stereotype like that, but we used to call them the rapist vans. They had no windows. And it seemed like in New Jersey, anytime a girl was abducted or assaulted, it was always in a white van with no windows. So like we were afraid of that. My daughter learned to be afraid of those vans. But in general, it's so easy. I work at night and I walk to my car sometimes at night, and I have a lot of cash on me sometimes. And I make sure somebody walks with me that works, even if he just walks, 20 feet behind me or 10 feet behind me, he's watching me get in my car. He's making sure I drive away, because it's so easy. You see somebody sitting by the dumpster and you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Hey, have a good night. It's
you're trying to be polite.
You're trying to be polite. And it's a split second that somebody, as quick as it takes to have that thought and turn around and go back in the room, you can be gone in that same amount of time.
Absolutely. And the thing that we should keep in mind as women and as people who are victimized in general, male or female, is that perpetrators hone their skills. The same way we learned how to use Word, the same way we all learned how to use PowerPoint, right? First time you did it, your thing was all over the place, but then you developed those skills. Perpetrators, they develop the skills too. They know what to say and what to do to make you disregard that uncomfortable feeling. That is why trusting your gut and recognizing that, okay, this is weird, this is off, I'm not comfortable with this, and then going to a safe spot that you know is safe. That is how you stay safe, because the guy sitting by the dumpster is going to wave at you politely and walk up and be like, hey, my tire's flat. Can I use your phone? Because he knows that that will make you double think like, oh, he's a helpless man and he needs my help, right? Like, oh, he's just a good guy that's having some tough luck. Let me give him my phone. And the next thing you know, you're in the backseat of your own car and you're being driven to wherever he wants to take you. And that's because they hone those skills. It's a skill set. It's not just, oh, a spur of the moment thing. And a lot of times, if you're going to be assaulted, it's not going to be by the stranger by the trash can. It's going to be by the guy that takes you home because you trust him. It's
Right.
going to be by the friend that you spend time with and you love and care about that takes advantage of you in a way that you never expected him to do. And then he's going to find a way to blame you for it. And that's why we have to be so vigilant on our feelings, our gut. How do we feel? What are our boundaries? Because when we know our boundaries, we know when somebody's pushing those.
Absolutely. So do you have any tips or tricks for, like, I know with me when I'm just working with some of my clients and they really, like they're, let's just say for instance, they're unaware of their emotions and they're trying to really get a hold on that. I tell them to write down everything. I'm like, when you feel something, write it down, journal about it, think about it. What are some ways that you have to maybe help people start to be more aware of their surroundings, if that makes sense?
Practice,
Mhm.
practice. Like when you're doing your regular routines, practice what cars are in the parking lot when you pull up and start looking every day and start to recognize which cars you see on a daily basis. That way, when you're pulling up to your office building and there's a random car that you don't recognize, you know to like maybe not park next to that car, or you're just aware that it's there. Start practicing with little things. The same thing goes with like boundaries, right? You practice with small boundaries first, with a
Right.
safe person that you can say no to. That's going to help you build the confidence for when you have those non-flexible boundaries that you're just, so you know that you're going to get flack. You know somebody's going to talk back. You know people are going to question why you're setting these boundaries. Don't start with those. Those are going to really dissolve your confidence. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but it worked.
Right. I know it's yours.
Those you start with the ones to gain your confidence, right? When you start working out for the first time, you don't go for a 10-mile run, you go for a walk around the block. When you start setting boundaries, you don't set your hard-lined boundaries first, you set the easy one. I don't want to go to this coffee shop. I would like to go to this tea shop. And you do it with somebody who's safe, your best friend that's going to be like, okay, sure, let's go to the tea shop. I got this, right? And then you have the confidence to build that. I also have a worksheet that I have on my website, and it's called the ideal version of you. And it helps you understand how to start setting those boundaries. It walks you through visualizing that ideal version of yourself. What does she look like? What does she feel like? How does she act? And then you ask yourself what her boundaries are. Because it's much easier to take yourself out of the emotional feeling of, I don't want to be spoken to that way, or I don't like this, in order to like, this is how I want to be treated. And once you have that, then you can start working through your emotional boundaries, your social boundaries, your time boundaries. And then you can ask yourself, how does she handle when
Mm,
somebody disrespects your boundaries? That way, you're not in that emotional state of feeling it right then and there. That way, you can actually project it into the future. And I have a worksheet, you write it out. You really write out those boundaries. And then the final step, once you've gotten some confidence, you've built, you ask, who does she allow in her life?
mm.
Because there's going to be people that you set boundaries that make their life harder and they're going to push back. And
Right.
how do you handle that? And that's where that ideal version of you, because you get to answer to yourself, why am I setting this time boundary? Why am I setting this social boundary? And that way, when somebody pushes those boundaries, you can go back to your why and you're confident in reinforcing that boundary. A lot of times when we try to set boundaries, we don't really know why we're setting it. We just know we don't like the feeling. I
Right.
don't like being spoken to that way. So when you go back and you say, Well, wait, why do I not like being spoken that way? Okay, it makes me feel bad about myself. It makes me feel worthless and useless. This is why. So when you tell that person, don't speak to me that way, you're not just having an emotional reaction. You're
Right.
telling that person, don't speak to me that way because it makes me feel worthless and useless. And that gives you backing, that gives you confidence in order to speak your truth, to know that you have value in this world and you are allowed to take up space and have your own feelings.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Those are good examples, especially because we talk a lot on this podcast about boundaries, because that's one of the biggest things when you've grown up and they've either been so violently violated or you haven't had any to begin with. It's a very difficult concept. And I love that you say start small with a friend. I always tell people, if you want to start with strangers, go to a restaurant and order something that's not on the menu. Like just
That's a
start
great
saying
one.
something you want that someone else has to maybe accommodate you for. And
Mhm.
and if they say no, we don't have that, then okay, what do you have to lose? Nothing. But it gives you that practice again. You say that muscle of just being like, I'm gonna see if I can get something, and
Yeah, I
it's
like that.
small. But some people have trouble even doing that. And that's a good place to start though. But I like that you say do it, make those boundaries with a friend and do that together. Man, I could literally talk to you forever. Uh, um, so this has been all very, very useful. And I think there's a lot of golden tips and tricks. And I think your website probably has a lot of stuff. If people want to reach out to you, where do they go?
You can find me. My website is www.prettyhandshardpunches.com. And then all of my social media handles are also prettyhandshardpunches.com. So I'm across all social medias, my website. Feel free to message me. I will send you that ideal worksheet for free. That way you can get started setting your boundaries. Again, it's Pretty Hands Hard Punches across all social medias.
Perfect. And I love that name. Do you have pretty hands? Is
I
that
don't because I broke a lot of boards with them, but when I was developing my curriculum, I had been told throughout my martial arts career that it was my job to look pretty and sell contracts. It wasn't my job to be like the head instructor, and so
wow.
the yeah, it goes pretty deep. We could talk about that for several hours, but I decided when I opened my business that I was going to be pretty and I was also going to have hard punches, and you can do both.
Absolutely. Yes, you absolutely can. And sometimes it's the nice, cute, pretty ones that have the hardest punch. And I love that.
Yes.
Absolutely love that. So thank you so much for coming. And I really appreciate it. But I want you to leave the guests with, or the listeners with maybe one more last tip, or if you had to give them one big final message, what would it be?
My big message to you and your audience is that self-care is self-defense. Knowing that you deserve love and compassion and you deserve to care for yourself also is the way that you start with self-defense. Because when you love yourself enough to fight back, you find ways to fight back.
Love it. Thank you so much, Elicia. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
And for everybody out there listening, you heard it. So take care of yourself, love yourself, be aware of your surroundings, and by all means, listen to that gut. There's a reason that we were given an instinct, an instinctual feeling. Listen to it. It will save you more times than it will hurt you. I promise. Thank you so much, and you have a blessed week.